What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the game on Pax8 Live, where we discuss all the cybersecurity shenanigans that occurred in the past week. Don't think we'll get to all the shenanigans today. It's been a rough one, but we'll get through as many as we can. Today, we're discussing APAC, Pax8's expansion to APAC, cybersecurity in APAC, and so much more. We'll have James Bergl from Pax8 on later. Let's dive straight into the news. All right, I want to start off
All
topic.
right.
This is not on the run of show, so
Yeah. I love
but let's
doing
talk.
that. It,
Let's
it
talk
makes the
about
girls
this
a little
week. It's
freaked
been a
out.
rough one. So, second largest school district in the country, in the U.S., LAUSD in Los Angeles, ransomware.
Yeah.
Now they seem to have some decent isolation because school went on as planned. Kids are still learning, so obviously an incident occurred, but seemingly they have things under control. I don't know. Like we've seen other school
Yeah.
districts get popped and schools out indefinitely, right? But that's a huge
Yeah.
one. It's
This
a
is
massive
LA.
school district. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
thousands
And
and thousands
and
and
I'll
thousands of
touch on
students.
this. This isn't just school districts, right? This is an endemic problem in the United States.
Mhm.
We have back to school, back to ransomware, but in the same breath,
Right.
like UCLA was compromised. The physics department of UCLA was compromised for almost a year with the FBI
Right.
knocking on the door. I myself put in an incident response inside their team, and they came back and said, "Hey, we don't deal with the subdomain of physics dot. Sorry, you guys have to move
Right.
along."
Right.
I think this is probably like on the nose, the most real example of just how bad our world really is around not only, incident response, but just in general, this concept of everybody talks about protect. Every vendor says, I'll
Right.
protect you.
Right.
Everything we hear says, I'll protect you. That's just not the case. You're going to lose. You're going to find
Right.
yourself in a
Right.
situation where you need to detect, respond, and recover. Right. And so we see these
Yeah.
things. But yeah, UCLA, the LA
Nobody is
school district
cyber
that's now
immune,
dealing
you
with
might
this.
say, right?
Right. We're,
Like it's
oh, come
cyber
on,
cyber
man.
immune
Now
is
you're
not a
trying to
thing.
start a fight.
I had to. I had to. And so the other
uh,
interesting piece of news, this broke yesterday. I found it on Twitter at like 11 o'clock at night. Uh, Patreon
Patreon.
fired their whole
Yep.
security team, all of them seemingly. Like
Yeah.
there's no
We don't
official
need
news
security
yet,
anymore. My
but
vendor
it's
protects me.
it's wild. Like
It is.
Patreon
It's
certainly doesn't
nuts.
handle anything sensitive. They're not a payment gateway or anything like that
No,
at
not at
all.
all. They don't pay for
No,
YouTube
no.
streamers to be able to walk through the forest happily, right? Like, no,
Yeah,
not at all.
yeah.
Uh,
It was a wild one.
yeah.
So really wild week in change. That LAUSD one is one to pay attention to because we don't know how much potential student and family data may have been
Oh,
compromised in
yeah.
that. So definitely pay attention to it, particularly if you're a parent in LAUSD. It's something you want to pay attention to. All right, Matt,
It's
let's
a
dive
good
into the
call
actual
out.
news that we plan to
Okay,
talk about today,
now we can
though.
get back on track so I stop getting those looks from the production side. So, one of the things about PAX8 is that our mission, mine and your mission, very certainly, Dom, is to try to educate, drive change in cybersecurity, help people succeed and start winning, and start realizing what all needs to be part of this for us to be successful. Well, guess what? We launched our Asia region. We started with one human. We now have 105 humans working in the Asia region. And even though my picture is right side up, I am definitely on the down under right now. So I am coming to you live at 5 a.m. Or 6 a.m. from Melbourne, which is not Melbourne. It is Melbourne. So is Brisbane. I'm learning. I'm starting to get my terminologies and shortening of words down like a true Aussie. But we launched this here earlier this year, and I came down really just to kind of see what the understanding of cybersecurity is, see if I can help and bring any value to the market. And we'll get into that later. But I wanted to kind of first reminisce in our own journey around this. Dom, you hired on when in PAX8?
It's 3 years this month, so 2019, September 2019.
Yeah. And I came on a year ago, last month.
Right.
And so you start realizing Pax8 has started chasing the security pundits and started to actually bring real security inside their organizations, not just at our
Right.
how do we protect ourselves level, but how do we raise the tide of our constituents and our partners. What is, Dom, if you think back, like what's one of the best successes that we've had in the last year around, pure cybersecurity education?
The increase in engagement, right? I think when we started having these conversations even a year ago, it was very much turn away, we couldn't get people to listen, right? We couldn't get people to listen when we would tell them things like your tools aren't going to protect you. We couldn't get vendors to listen when we said, please stop saying things like cyber immune, right? Now we're to a point where we're making headway, which is great, right? We're not where we need to be, but I feel like when we go to partners and we have conversations and we present, people listen, right? You still get the occasional one that's mad about MFA being a minimum or something to that effect, but in general, people are listening. And now I feel like we're making progress talking about frameworks and the understanding of
Yep.
defensibility and the understanding that you're going to lose. Those are huge, right? It's something that's been understood in large scale cybersecurity in the enterprise and government space for a long time. So we're finally getting there in the smaller end of the private sector.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it's a very personal one, right? We threw a security throwdown. You and I and Henry Snaza and a
Yeah,
bunch of other people that I don't want to be rude and ignore, but we decided to invite privately, without saying much
right,
fanfare, MSPs to come sit down and just focus on cybersecurity for an entire day, right? We focused on modern cloud security. You educated people on ways to go to market with products like Microsoft, AAD, AADS, identity and access management, things like that. And I think for me, it was one of those moments where I know that I sometimes have to paint a face on a volleyball and talk to it
right,
about security because
right,
everybody's tired of hearing it, right? But in general, we had a full room. We literally filled it
right.
up without any marketing. People came, they engaged, and so much so that we're now having a security boot camp. But tell people what happened with that one, Dom. Like we had the boot camp, we had only
So
100
we
seats, and now where do we sit?
Yeah, we filled it in 36 hours. It filled up immediately. It was something to watch. So
Yeah.
we've expanded it. There are some seats still available. So I encourage you to go to pax8.com/events and get there. Will be a huge event, and it's that throwdown Matt mentioned, plus other vendors that will help you build a more complete stack around modern workplace. So we're not ready to announce vendor names yet, but I love who we're talking to, and I'm super excited to get them out here and give you that more well-rounded stack for your security
Yeah.
around modern
E-
office.
even even going to bring a few people we haven't mentioned yet to demonstrate some attacks and some live red teaming
Yep.
and just kind of explaining. One of the biggest things for me that I learned over the last 3 or 4 years has been I cannot defend something if I don't know how to attack it. And I've spent a lot of my
Right.
time learning how to attack it and learning how to do these things
Right.
in a way that's meaningful. But that's, I think, one of the biggest wins around cybersecurity. And we're not just doing this to beat our chest around the world. In fact, even if it's not related to Pax8, we're seeing people now do the 1,000 smiley faces or frowny faces, right? We're seeing people now take vendors that stand up and say, I'll protect you from everything, and say, that's not okay. This isn't okay.
Right.
You can't say that. You have to set realistic expectations. You have to. And so I think, the maturity of the US market in the last year and a half, definitely not because of Dom and I, but certainly we play this very small part, is starting to continue to rise. And we're starting to find more and more of this kind of just, if you will, belief that we have to figure this out. People have stopped
Right.
these shiny eyes of, I'll just put on an antivirus and we're fine, or I'll put on my EDR of SentinelOne and then we're good. And starting to realize that security is operations, security is the motions themselves, and it's not just this, very small kind of window of things. But I just wanted to say one of the cool things about that corollary is in the United States, and we'll get to this in a minute, when you and I ask a question, right? We love asking this question of our partners. Raise your hand if you're above a 5 in your cybersecurity knowledge, right? Keep it up if you're a 6. Keep it up if you're a 7. If we do that in the United States, probably at least a quarter of the room has their hands raised above a
I had
5.
one guy go to 10.
I
Yeah.
we did. Now he was being a
Yeah.
smart ass, and I think he's probably thought he was
No,
buying
no, no, no.
7 or
This was
8.
a different room, and he was not.
Oh,
He
another
he
one.
thought, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They thought they
He
were
was
a
a
10.
10. He just had it solved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of it.
I think
100%.
that
Cyber immune.
oh, he's 100% cyber immune. Yeah, he knows it all. But it blows my mind that we feel like, as practitioners, we know it all. But we've
Right.
started to gradually see that drop a smidge, right? And then if you ask that same question of how much does your client know, they'll say it's a 1 or below. And you start
Right.
finding that that is what my mission is, right? That's what your mission is we want to educate both the partner, but also that end consuming entity of those customer base. But let's move on to the next news piece, because we're now going to start focusing a little bit on the ANZ market. And you have Australia's government is actually doing a lot like what we see in CISA. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Dom. If I said the word Five Eyes, can you rapidly name the 5 countries involved in the Five Eyes community?
Ooh, well, us obviously. Uh,
Yep.
the UK, Australia.
Uh-huh.
I don't got the last two.
New Zealand and
Uh,
Canada. So it's anywhere the
oh,
crown touches for the most part, right?
fair,
Speaking of
fair.
which, it's horrible to see the passing of our queen in that space. But if you think of the Five Eyes community, what I see about it is you find these corollaries. All of them are starting to realize in
Yeah.
CISA, NCSC, ACSC, you're starting to realize we've got to get the public at least doing something. Now, I will withhold your comments as we bring this piece up, but if you guys don't mind, bring up bring up our Australian Essential 8, because that's what I wanted to focus on today. So the ACSC came through and said, hey, let's start getting things where our businesses can start running down the same path as the rest of the Five Eyes. I bring up Five Eyes because the Five Eyes community is essentially a intelligence sharing community that formed after World War II that was based on our side of that fight. And it's between Great Britain and the UK and Australia and New Zealand, us and Canada. And you start seeing very similar patterns, right? CISA came out and started pushing the top 18, or started pushing the NIST CSF framework and driving these kind of, here's the totality of what you need to be focusing on to reduce the bell curve risk, as you and I like to say, right? And so
Right.
we have the same thing in Australia. They have the Essential 8, which we have that graphic here, if you don't mind bringing that up for us. Yeah, so they're trying to bring it up with simple things like, hey, application whitelisting and phishing, and in my mind, I don't want to beat this up. This was put up by Vectra just because they made a very good version of it. But the original Essential 8 is, in my mind, baby steps towards where we really need to be. And you're starting to see, I don't know if you've seen this or not, Dom, but there's now an expanded Essential 8 that is being developed that is significantly, significantly deeper into a lot of those topics and expansion, and starts to mimic much more of what you'd see in NIST CSF and some of the CIS frameworks as well. But I think, initial thoughts on this, Dom, as to kind of what is that first step for markets that are trying to struggle with cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think in general, cyber has evolved in countries that get punched in the face the most, right? It just is what it is.
It's how my
The
eye
ones that
points in
get
a
it
different direction. It used to
right.
be straight.
The one that gets attacked the most is going to spend the most money on. It's the same issue in corporate America. The CISO has no budget until they get breached, and then he has all the money he wants, right? It's
Sure.
the same concept. So you start to see these iterative baby steps happen. Where at one point there was no NIST CSF. At one point CIS wasn't an organization. We see our DoD coming in hot with CMMC and 800-171. This is that
Yeah.
same sort of evolution. So for me, the Essential 8 feels very protecty. It doesn't. There's not a lot of detect. There's not a lot of what happens when you do get punched in the face. So it definitely
Right.
feels very much so like we're in that space of how do we block a couple punches, which is a great
Right.
first step. So I'm excited to see the expanded Essential 8 because I really wanted to have some detect and respond in there. That really is the key nowadays. I feel like I spend more time talking about detect and respond than I do protect, just nowadays,
And you
right?
should.
Because we're getting punched in the face
I
all the time,
joke.
right?
Well, I joke, right? There's only 2/5 before the boom, right? There's
Right,
only 2/5 before the bomb goes off. That's identify and
right,
protect. And I think it's kind of a
right,
little stupid, and I'm not the smartest guy, but there's 3/5 and 3/5 bigger than 2/5 after the boom.
right,
And so
right,
I
right,
agree,
right,
while well, if you look at IG1 on CIS, or if you look at NIST CSF, they very much start with a heavy protect surface, but then they start
right.
pivoting into this maturity cycle of detect, respond, and recover.
Hmm.
Shameless plug, if you're going to be in Chicago next weekend, I will be in Chicago doing a tabletop exercise. And Dom, you've had the privilege of seeing this. This will be its first debut content, which means it'll suck. But after that, it'll get better. But I'm going to be
It's
walking
gonna make
MSPs
people
through an
sweaty
entire
though, man.
ransom.
It's gonna be
Dude,
wild.
it is. Yeah, yeah. We're forcing them to think through what an entire ransomware of their entire client base looks like, and having to make Sophie's choice type decisions of, I want this client to be the one suing me. I need this client to be the one that fires me because I can't give them enough attention. And it really helps people understand that we need to focus on those additional components of response and how do we recover? And do I have a plan? Do I have operations in place for those things? So speaking of bringing that to the Australia market, one of the things that I wanted to do is bring in some of the resources here that are fighting that good fight, that are starting to drive the market and bring Pax8 and what we've learned through the evolution of the stateside and through Canada. We have obviously the same kind of motions happening in our Canadian market. And so I wanted to bring in James Bergl. I'll introduce him. He's actually our VP of market development. No, I failed on that. Thank you. You know, Dom, I only get one right a day, so I had to go there. So James, welcome to the party. Even if I did butcher your title in true
Don't worry,
Mac
I was
fashion.
cheating looking at the show notes. So
Yeah, it's unfair. You're doing great. You have two screens. I have two eyes, but I don't have two screens today. So James, I wanted to bring you in and just ask you to tell me a little bit about who you are. Give me, the 5-minute version, of your backstory, where you come from, some of your roots, and then just kind of tell me what you do for Pax8 in the Asia region.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Hey, Dom. Nice to see you both. James Bergl. I am based in Sydney. I've spent the last week or so with Matt Lee, and it has been.
I'm sorry, bro. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I have a new man crush. I've had an absolute blast. I've been in Brisbane with Matt. We were in Melbourne yesterday. I'm back in Sydney to see my baby and wife and make sure they're still here whilst I'm out on the road so much. And then I'm going to be in Adelaide next week before we continue on with our 8-city roadshow. So I came on board with Pax8 in April of this year. Very familiar with the company. I've been following Pax8 for the last 15 to 18 months or so. And, my background, I was at an organization called Datto. I led that team here in Australia and New Zealand for the last 7 years. Had an opportunity to help them get into the market. But Pax8 kept popping up on all of the online forums in Australia. The last couple of years, we've had COVID. Australia's restrictions have been tighter, I think, than anyone else in the world. So no one has been allowed to leave the country. They shut the borders. And interestingly enough, the impact of this was that a lot of MSPs in the MSP community were going online a lot more to do a lot of their research in terms of what's new, what's hot, what should I be looking at. And I thought, well, I need to do the same. I don't know what's hot in the other countries. And the one name and brand that kept popping up was Pax8. And I thought, what's this Pax8 thing? So I did some homework, did some research, and found out that Pax8 was absolutely kicking goals in North America, looking to launch here. And I had an opportunity to meet with Chris Sharp, our CEO for Asia, and came on board. So came on board in April, and my role as VP of Business Development is really to like you said, Matt, is fight the good fight, is to go out there and help us as a region to build our business, build our brand, build the messaging from cybersecurity is a significant part of that story at the moment. So I'm out. I'm meeting partners. I'm helping to bring them into our ecosystem and really enable partners so that they know more than they did before they engaged with us, and to support them in growing their business. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dom, if you want to crack into kind of the next piece of this, I just wanted to say one of the pieces I love about that is we have absolutely been driving that education for the last few days, right? And it's been great. But Dom, you go ahead.
Yeah, keep leading with education. It's what works for us. And I think it's an important message to drive home to partners. The more you teach your prospects, the more likely they're going to want to spend money with you. So free value always goes a long way. But I wanted to dive into cyber in particular, and in your market. It's definitely different and in a different phase than we are, or that the UK is at. So really, like, maybe start with today, but really in the future, how will cybersecurity play a role in the day in the life of an MSP down there?
I mean, it's a good question, because we've been I've been in the channel for the last decade or so, and cyber's for the last 5-6 years been part of our regular dialogue. And I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room with all of these conversations with MSPs, and as much as I try to enable and educate them, I try to be a student, and I have gone to our partner community and said, guys, teach me, what are you doing? What is working? How are you going to market? And the thing I've really noticed in the last 6 months when it comes to the cyber conversation is that there's a big gap in terms of probably where the market needs to be and where they are now. I mean, Matt, you talked about it a little bit earlier. Most partners say there may be a 4 or a 5 and their customers are a 1. I don't think they are at a 4 or 5. I think they're probably at a 2 or a 3 and the customers are at a 0.1, 0.2. And that's what I thought was fascinating in these conversations, is that, you know, we've had the conversations, price, package, profit from cybersecurity. Can we create bundles? Can we create good, better, best cybersecurity? And
Right.
you know what I learned, and I've had a couple of epiphanies in speaking with Matt for the last few weeks, and I feel like, you know, he's helping us to see the wood for the trees. It's not necessarily good, better, best, but it's about encompassing the right security for the right maturity of the organization that you're in. And the magic that I've taken away from these conversations, and the epiphany that I saw happen in the room, and I spoke to partners at these roadshows, was, hey, I was confused. I was thinking of becoming an MSSP, or I was thinking of, I'm not responsible for the cybersecurity because I'm the help desk guy. I just respond and I do the routine maintenance and the patching. Security is not my responsibility. And I think what Matt has really helped us to learn is that that's not the case. The reality is with the challenges that we all face, is the government are having to step up and put legislations in place, like the Critical Infrastructure Protection Acts that you've got over there in North America, that we've just launched in April 2022 over here, that effectively say, if you touch the data, if you touch the infrastructure, you touch the data, that's your responsibility. And, you know, I spoke to some really
Yes.
smart people in the
So
room.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is, and these partners came up to me afterwards and they said, you know what, I was thinking of becoming an MSSP after listening to Matt speak for 45 minutes ago. I don't need to do that. Like, this is
Right.
just one of those buzzword terms. MSSP, what does that really mean? Because I'm responsible for that. I actually just need to almost become a cyber first MSP that is ensuring that I'm protecting myself, I'm defendable. If anyone asks me, why did I do this? Why has there been a breach? I can put my hands up and say, I put my best foot forward. I followed a framework, whatever that may be. I educated them. I explained to them, this is the impact of your decisions. And even though I put them on a cybersecurity training course saying, don't open stupid emails, they open a stupid email. And that way you can defend yourself. So that is that was a big epiphany for me. Is just like, if you touch the data, then you've got a level of responsibility, and I think that really helped to provide clarity in the market. So I think we are a little bit behind North America. I don't think we're that behind. Like Australia, New Zealand in particular,
No, I don't think so either.
MSP
Yeah.
markets, but I really think that our enablement is going to help them to raise their game.
Well, and I think, you hit a couple nails on the head there, and your problems are remarkably similar to our problems, right? The user that we've trained 100 times is still going to click that damn link every time, right? It's just what they do. Like, it's somewhere wired. One of the connections in their brain says, click the link. Like, we can't fix that. You need brain surgeon, right? And it's part of that step in that journey.
And it's not just black and white. You've had your cyber training, and now you're ticked off. It's an evolution, because as we get better, we get smarter. Our hackers and those criminals and those threat actors are always trying to be one step ahead. And I'm getting text messages, I'm getting phone calls. There's new sorts of actors, and this training enablement education needs to continually evolve, and that's our responsibility as an MSP vendor and as an MSP. That is what our journey and responsibility is, to keep fighting the good fight, which keeps evolving.
So you mentioned,
I think that's probably the best call out.
Frameworks. Sorry, I got one more. I'm gonna steal your second here.
No, go ahead, bro. I'm good.
You mentioned the usage of frameworks, and I brought up, we very much so often talk about defensibility here and the weakness of the legal foundation in the U.S., right? So it's the Wild West. There's really been no firm legal precedent set that says this is how you handle a cybersecurity case, right? There's small little tidbits of case law here and there, but our system is so complicated that case law in California might not apply in New York. Like it's, it's all over the place. Point being is there's no firm way to handle that. Is the challenge down there similar to where if you end up in court over such and such incident, such and such, I'm going to say it, breach, um, you know,
Ooh.
do we know how to handle that yet? Is that still something that's just completely up in the air in the legal theater?
It's a journey, and we're on that journey at the moment. And a couple of years ago, there was a new legislation called the Notifiable Data Breach Act, which said that if you do encounter some sort of data breach, then it is your legal responsibility to notify the government of that. And if you don't, then you are going to be liable for some sort of some sort of impact, some sort of fine, etc. Like all of these things, they start saying this is what we're going to do, and it's going to start out as government first, and then as maturity raises, we're going to start to see them enforcing some of these legislations. And actually, there was something I got sent just last night from one of our partners that said, "I've just seen the first organization, the first business, the first corporate be sued for negligence." So.
Yep.
It's going to start happening. If it's happened once, they've got their poster child for, hey, this isn't us just talking. We're going to start implementing this, and I think that as we proceed, we're going to start to see more and more of this government and these legislations holding people to account.
And you see, both of our legal systems are based on the Anglican system of law, which is a precedence-based system, right? And so you're
Right.
starting to see those precedents, to your point, Dom, be in existence, right? With us, we passed CERCIA back in March, right, which is our first legislation towards trying to create some of this critical infrastructure reporting capabilities. And here we have SLACIP, right, SLACIP, which is the same kind of concept that came out in April. So we're very close in that same space. And I've made this prediction before. I generally believe, just like the cigarette lawsuits with Fred Levin and Philip Morris, we will see rock star attorneys creating precedents out of the civil side just as fast as we do, if not faster, than the criminal side. There's still not a lot of criminal prosecution for cigarettes, right? It's still a legal system. It's still fine to be selling. But you see a lot of civil aspects of this company knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing is wrong, and they still proceeded forward, and it caused decrement to the overall constituency.
It's always been that way, right? Yeah. Civil law or civil cases always move faster than because it's politics, right? There's not very much politics in a civil case, right? Depending on who you're suing.
Yeah, there's not. It's just money.
General, it's money. It's money changing hands. And if you look at, speaking of tobacco and the lack of legislators' ability to catch up, Juul was in the middle of a huge civil case for the same stuff that Philip Morris was, right? So that's how slow sort of the
and they have the precedent though. And they have the precedent though to fall back on. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
It's much quicker than the Philip Morris case.
Let's pivot a little bit, because one of the things, and maybe I'll do a little edification real quick, is that as I ask that same question in these roadshows that we've been on, we're going to touch on that in just a second. When I say, how many of you are above a 5? Have you noticed, James, the humility in the Australian market that I don't see in the US market today? In the sense that I've, in the entire 2 people, 140 or so MSPs, have had 4 people raise their hand saying they're a 5. So you almost feel like there's a more willing student here in ANZ today. And so I'll pivot to this question. As we're wrapping up the first half of the 8-City Roadshow, at least certainly my piece of this endeavor, tell me some of the things you've learned from watching partners and those conversations you have for the next 3 hours after I decide it's time to put my pretty little head to bed with partners.
Look, I think that it's a really interesting fact, the humility, the humbleness, and I think with that comes because they're nervous, they're scared, they're recognizing that this ambiguity in the market is potentially going to impact their business in case they have a breach, and they're scared in case there's some sort of breach that hits their RMM and then pushes that out to their client base, which we saw happen with a couple of vendors in the last couple of years. But a lot of them are going, it's hard. Like, how do I successfully run an MSP today? Like, on one side, everything is becoming commoditized. And I would say the more mature ones are going, I need to evolve my business. I'm an MSP. All of my services are becoming commoditized. I'm struggling to maintain and justify my value. And there's a push and the pull. There's they're being pulled up and going, in order for me to keep my business innovative and justifying a valuable price, I need to continue to add value to my clients. And I think that security is definitely one of those ways that which they're going to do that. They're just going, where on earth do I start? I mean, this is really, really hard. That is something that I've learned, because I know that I'm not the smartest guy. I'm at the bottom of the ranks when it comes to smart guys in this industry. But
I get up one rung, just one rung.
I put them all on a pedestal, and I'm like, you guys are smart. You guys are the brainchilds. And what I've learned is that they're also going, hey, I'm not too sure how to do this. So that was really cool to see that, because I think that's where my role and our role as an education partner can really come in and help our partners. And that's what I get passionate about. That's what I like getting out of bed in the morning for, is to make a difference with partners, to help them grow their business, to help put money in their pockets. And if we can help them to do that, I feel like we're onto something here. So that was one thing. The other piece that I've taken away from speaking with you, Matt, and again, I just go and chat to partners. What did you think of this conversation? And these smart partners, even the ones that were at a 4 or a 5, say that was such a valuable session. We had a cybersecurity lunch in Brisbane on Monday of this week, and we had a couple of smart cookies in that room, and their feedback when they spoke to their account managers was just like, that was one of the best sessions that I've ever had. Like, just to be in the room and actually be able to go head to head with someone that's smarter than me in a cyber perspective is really clever. But for those that are not a 4 or 5, that may be at a 1 or a 2, and they said and this is what they've learned, which is what I've learned, is the best way for us to be thinking about this is not to protect our customers as a priority, but get our own house in order. Put your oxygen mask on first. Yeah. Make sure that you have put your best foot forward to defend yourself, whether it's in a court of law, as Matt, I've taken this from you, the law of reasonable people, is how can we assure that we've done the right thing? And this is how I think about it. If I was going to go set up an MSP or a cyber first MSP today, I would say we need to be defensible. We need to align to a framework. It doesn't matter which one, but I tell you what, after our conversations, the CIS one is what I would probably lean on. You've got 18, 19 controls that you just say, follow the ball. And again, I'm a dummy. I just want to follow the map, go, cool, I'm going to do step 1, then 2, then 3. And when I get caught out, which I probably will, then I'll say, hey, I followed the map that you provided me on this journey. So that's I think really, really cool and really helpful. That all of a sudden, wood for trees. This is where I'm going. This is my direction, and these are the steps that I have to take on the way. So that is, I guess that those are a couple of things that I've learned myself, and I've felt the energy of learning take place over this week as well.
I always like watching the faces of people, because I start with this one premise. Okay, I'll stand up and I'll say this one thing. Your job is not to protect your client's network. Your job is to be defensible in how you choose to do so. And I think it's that concept of, my doctor and let's say surgeon is going to be defensible in how they chose to do it, both with, should I operate on this guy? Is there a value? Am I going to get a return? Am I going to be wasting the operation I could give to someone else? There's the first defensibility. But then once they decide to cut, am I using the right knife? Am I making the right incision at the right place? Once I'm making that incision, am I doing everything I should inside the body? Am I not nicking things? I'm not going to leave any sponges. I'm going to make sure I return with all the things I put in. But then even after that, did I give the post-surgical dose of antibiotics? Did I follow up with my patient? Did I check blood pressures? All of those things are those things that in our mind is just turn on SentinelOne. And it's right. Such a difference in that understanding, right? Like that's what I've learned the most is that. Yeah, thank you. I try. I get one a day, and luckily it's really early here in Australia, so I have no other obligations. But the point is that as we start thinking about things in those terms, then it really gives you a map. I think to your point, in this, James, is that it is so much more clarity than knowing that just turning on protection is not right, and yet that's all you have. And if you listen to vendors, that's the only answer. And as you start realizing what we're preaching, and I think what I've noticed the most out of this is just how starved the Australian market is from these kind of messages, right? When you put out this roadshow for Pax8 that everybody's heard of, we've run out of room. Like, we genuinely had to add a table yesterday just to fit the people that were coming for this in the room. And it was, to me, one of those things that kind of says, not only is there a gap in the market of just being supported in that way, but there's a thirst for this knowledge of what's my roadmap? How do I go forward? And instead of us talking about selling SKUs or buying products, just like that surgeon doesn't ask for what sponges we're going to buy or what scalpel or what antibiotics, they know they need them. They know that's part of the course. They understand that those pieces are part of what they're doing. And so I think in my kind of surprise or maybe just happiness, I've been so excited by just the engagement, James. Like, I've had enough questions. Most people don't know this. I'm an introvert. I absolutely run out of energy as I continue to speak to people, and it takes a lot from me. And so what's been really interesting is I've gotten to exhaustion every time. I've gotten to a point where I just couldn't answer another question. I had no more energy left because the demand is so high, right? And I think that's what's been so just sparking to me of a positive here is that similar to the United States, you have this just deep understanding of once you give them a message like that, it instantly turns on and they instantly say, next, let's go, let's get forward. And so I've been excited by that, James. It's been really a spark in my life this last two
Yeah.
shows. So,
I mean, we were so I've had the responsibility of running the road shows, not just running it, but actually doing all of the coordination of the events as well. And believe it or not, I am not an event manager, but after this show, I'm going to put event management on my resume. But yeah, I've been choosing the menus. They've said, do you want fish or chicken or beef? And I've been saying, do you want one desk or two desks outside? And I didn't realize how much work goes into running these events. So I want to say kudos to all of the event management teams out there, because you guys do an amazing job, and you are the hidden heroes behind the success of these events. But I was a little bit nervous because Melbourne, like Sydney, we had 25 people before registration started, and Melbourne is usually the same. I'm sitting there as the event manager and also kicking it off. And there wasn't that many people here, but there was an accident out on the freeway, which meant that a whole bunch of people got stuck, and and many people got delayed. A couple of people came 45 minutes late. Like, I'm sorry I'm late. I nearly turned around. I said, thank you for not turning around. And some sat in the car for hours, which should take 15 minutes. And at the end, they said, this was a real pain in the backside to get to, but thank you, because this was definitely worth it. Like, I brought a couple of my team, and we've all got something out of this, and particularly just getting clarity around where do we take our security messaging and what should we be thinking about. So you're absolutely right, Matt. It was great to see that energy, that acceptance, that coachability in our partners, but also we're not done. Like, we're just getting started here, and I think that we need to continue to evolve our messaging and our story so that we can help our partners fight the good fight, because it's getting bigger by the day.
And we're going through
enthusiasm you're seeing, and humility, and where we're starting or where they're starting today will create a huge amount of momentum, right? If you know that you're not there yet, you're gonna want to get there. Right. And in that same question Matt asked, I always say, I'm somewhere between a 6 and a 7. And then I read something and I feel like I'm a 5 again. And then, but that humility is what drives me to keep learning. And that humility is going to create massive momentum in the market down there. Right. Because they all want to learn it. They all understand where they're at. So they're not skipping lessons. They're not trying to solve everything in one day. So I think it creates huge potential for maturity, and a lot of maturity in a short amount of time. So it's really exciting to hear all that.
Yeah. Matt, I want to ask you a question. I mean, you've gone around the world, and you've gone around the world, and you're speaking to partners. Where do you see Australia sitting from the conversations you're having versus North America? Like, if Aussies asked you the question, how mature am I, and where are we on our journey compared to where the leaders are? And the question, is America leading the way in terms of cybersecurity, or are there other markets that are also, doing really, really well?
Well, we're a fairly arrogant lot, so of course I'd have to answer that with yes. No, I tease.
No.
I actually, it's joking. I know, thanks. Joking aside, this is a first off, I never get asked questions, so this makes me feel like the girl at the ball here. But yeah, so for me, if you had asked me a year ago where the various constituent markets are based on my experience, I would say that the United States is finally at that point where we've put the keys in the car, we've started driving forward, we've bumped into a few trash cans, we don't know how to parallel park, but by God, we at least can get back and forth to school every day without major dings. But if I was to say where was, the UK, I think the UK has challenges very similar to being a very VAR-centric world and having some challenges of not having a well-defined operations of MSP. And I'll step back and define that first. I don't think security is tools. I think security is operations. And when you start kind of internalizing that, you realize that the things that made MSPs really successful was being hyper efficient at operations, being good at doing this task, being good at keeping CSATs, being good at tracking tickets and looking at time and looking at KPIs. And so I'd like to start with that being a base layer that the UK kind of does struggle with, in the sense that they aren't that company. They haven't been that company. And so they have to build that base layer in addition to the security knowledge. So that's the first piece. Canada, in the same right, has had the operations side and the efficiency side, but is just now getting started in some of that cybersecurity space. And I'd put them probably even 2 to 3 years behind the United States in their own adoption of these things across the board. But if you look at Australia, if you had asked me this before this trip, I'd have said they were 3 years behind. I just said that behind the United States, at the US level, we're really, really hyper efficient at MSPs, right? We've had True Methods for about 11 years. We've been driving through SLI so we can understand, are we doing things right? We have KPIs, we have great HUDs displays. We're doing a layer and a very nice petri dish for adding in these security sprinklings, in my mind. If you'd asked me, though, US was about 3 years ahead of Australia. But I would say just in the last time of talking to these MSPs and looking at the conditions of the market, looking at the starvation of the market to answer these questions, looking at the growth that we're seeing already in our world, I would probably say they're getting closer to less than a year behind us. And in fact, if you looked empirically, we passed SLAKIP came into being 1 month after we did CERCIA. So I would probably say Australia is a bit behind in the sense that they're just now answering that question. But I would say it's not necessarily the MSP's fault. I think they've been the petri dish. They just haven't had that rife seed of information dropped in front of them
Right.
to ramp forward with that. And I know I'm in Australia and I'd like to leave the country, so I'm trying not to be too diminutive. But I also feel like there's a little bit of a culture of, if you're winning or too far ahead of the mark, then others look at you maybe diminutively. And in the US, it's actually a different category. It's very pedestal. If you have that one winner that's way ahead of the mark, you put them on a pedestal and you drive towards it. Here, you have a little normalization of the market that tries to rise together. So if you look at that, I think Australia will rise somewhat uniformly together in a lot of ways, that the US will have haves and have-nots that separate quite a bit more. So I guess if you put my gun to head, I'd probably say Australia and the US are quite on parity, with different attributes of the fight and how they win. So I'm very happy to see that. I think the conditions are right here. After talking to some of the MSPs, I feel like there's a gap in the products they have available to them. I think there's a gap in the way they can go to market with a lot of those products. And if you look back on your Datto days, people don't realize, guess what? Backup is security. And if you look at that market, Australia very much parodied the United States market in that growth, right? I think you guys were extremely successful in Datto's ANZ market. And I think that parallel kind of plays out in the rest of cybersecurity as well, in my mind. Dom, do you have any thoughts on that question? I think that's a fantastic one.
Yeah, I honestly didn't have much of a clue. Because I run pro services, we get the occasional project where a customer has a site in Australia. Now, of course, we're meeting Australian partners. So my research has been around data privacy, and what impacts, like,
Oh yeah.
can I touch that data, right? In a lot of cases, I can't. So for me, I feel like Australia is definitely ahead of the US and North America in general from a data privacy perspective.
I agree with that.
And I've ranted about this on my blog before, where we really need in the US a federal privacy standard, something to the effect of a GDPR. And I forgot what it was called in Australia, but because ours is a hot mess, we got 50 states, we're going to have 50 different sets of rules if we don't get this.
24 active legislations right now.
Yeah,
right?
Dude, it's wild. So, so I definitely want to give Australia a ton of credit towards that. And in just this conversation and sort of reading into the top 8 and all of that, I definitely feel like Australia is, like I said, has that momentum, right? And a lot of markets do not have momentum. If you look at, even if we just take well-developed countries, right, like Canada, like the UK and the EU economic area, they have the want, they just don't have the momentum yet. And Australia has this momentum
Yeah.
that's really cool to learn about. So I don't know. I can't put a number on how far behind or ahead of the US you might be from a cyber perspective, but I'm really happy to see momentum.
Yeah.
I
And I
would
think
say,
that comes back to, go ahead, James.
but I was going to say
I've
that
been cutting
it's
people
great
off
to
all
hear.
day.
I think there's a little bit of a lag here, but I think it's great to hear, and I've got the perspective that MSPs in Australia and New Zealand as well. New Zealand's, I think, a really mature and progressive company when it comes to IT and security. But I share that sentiment. I think that they do a really, really good job. What's given me just a little bit more comfort is that, like, we're all in this together. That we haven't figured this out, and even the smart guys haven't figured it out. So I was getting nervous myself, going like, I get this anxiety. I don't know what I would do. I don't know what to recommend, but that's okay because none of us have got the magic bullet. But Australians, they love to travel. I bet a bunch of people listening have met an Australian, not in Australia. And if there's an opportunity for Australians to get overseas to the US, they love to do that, and they love to do it, one, for the travel, but also because they are sponges. They say, "What do you want to go to these conferences?" North America, they say, I want to speak to other Americans. I want to speak to other markets. I want to see what are they doing and what can I learn? What are the tools they're using, the processes, how do they price? And they want to bring that. So I think you guys have still got, an edge on us in terms of maturity, but I think that Australians got that humility to say that I know that I'm not the best, and I want to just keep learning as well.
Yeah. I would actually
Yeah,
say
I like
that's
that perspective a
probably the
lot.
best answer of that. Yeah, in the sense that it's the
Yeah.
humility that means there's not an arrogance that stops you from growing. In fact, I went to lunch yesterday with the IT department, is the name of the MSP, which is a legit name of an MSP.
I
And
was
we sat
wondering,
down
you're
and,
telling that story before, and I was like, the IT department. Yeah.
the
How big
IT
of an IT
department?
department do we
No,
have
that's
in
the name of the
Australia? What?
MSP. Yeah,
That's
no,
pretty
it's
cool. I like it.
fantastic. And I sat down with him, and it was great because he and his wife just bought this MSP from their father, and they completely gutted it and changed almost everything and started driving towards making cybersecurity an endemic part. And as I sat down with him and we talked about my history at an MSP and some of the lessons I learned and some of the things that we went through, they probably took 35, 40 notes. And I got to say, I'll add to that, we were fairly sauced. And so on top of being, they were just so into that, trying to gain perspective, trying to understand, trying to move forward, trying to learn what others have done. And I think it's that humility and that momentum and some of that maturity that speaks towards a very good capability growing very rapidly inside the ANZ and maybe even all of Asia market as that continues to grow between Australia and New Zealand. So I would echo that, and I think you're right. It's the humility and the momentum that Dom mentioned, but also that kind of operational maturity that's already existed that they've had to live with just to be profitable, just to grow, and in their mind they self-define this as a much smaller market than the U.S. And I would actually counter that in some ways that. When we were doing our MSP, we only needed 3% of Wichita, which was like 300,000, humans or something to make our market make sense. And I think that same kind of momentum exists here in Australia too. And I think the other concept we haven't talked about that it does exist here in Australia is a little more FAFO. And maybe I won't say exactly what that means, but it means mess around and find out. And I think one of the interesting parts about Australia is that they generally are quick to roll up their sleeves and take a test and be humble about losing in that test and moving forward. And at least in the small microcosm of the 140 or so MSPs I've spoken with here. But I believe there's a little bit of just, let's do it. Let's go. I'm ready to go. And I think that iteration capability is what means moving forward. And I'll give some actual anecdotal evidence to this. I've actually met with more people in Australia in the MSP market that are all AAD than I have in the US. Dom, as I talk to people and I talk about Azure Active Directory binding and Intune and endpoint management, people are like, that's old shit. Like, leave me alone. Oh, gosh, sorry, y'all. That's old stuff. Leave me alone. Right? That's stuff that I've done for a while. And so for me, it was
Right,
almost
right.
off-putting at first but it just shows, I think, how quickly they are to use new technologies and to lean into those kind of things and be iterative and learn and move forward. So I have a lot of happiness in my heart, James, as I leave after tomorrow's show or next week's show, and leave it in your capable hands, that this market will continue to grow on its own. And if we feed it with the right information, we feed it with the right products, and we can bring the right vendors, and Dom and I can continue to win our fights on getting these vendors to be more secure, less histrionic, more driving towards actual security and actual where do I fall in that chart. I think that Australia is going to be a very viable way to protect its constituency and as a result, continue to grow as an economy. I mean, I think that's what we're really talking about here, is not just security, but our economies in general. So I've kind of run out of stuff that I wanted to chat about on this, James. I'm unless you have any final closing thoughts, either of you boys, let's kind of go around the horn and add some closing thoughts. But I'm done talking for the morning. So thank you.
Well, you fit into 55 minutes what a normal person would fit into 2 hours. So you've done well, Matt.
Imagine 2 hours. It's crazy. The people at lunch the other day had to sit through almost 2 hours of me.
That's it. But on a
Right.
on a serious note, I think that like I love Australia. I've been here for 9 years. I came across from the UK, and like you said, Australians like to give it a go. It's true. It's a cultural thing that we will always give our mates a go. There's this concept of mateship down here in Australia, where we're here to support each other, and it's the same thing in business as well. And you know, when I was in the UK, everyone was very skeptical, and it was difficult to get sign off. And with Australians, if you can go in, deliver a value proposition, and they trust you, they'll give it a go. And if you don't do well, then you'll hear about it, and they'll hold you accountable for that. And you need to do the right thing. But that's a great thing in doing business here, is that I think that, you know, we're going to have a few hiccups along the way, but it does drive innovation, progression, and helps to take us to the next level. But, you know, overall from my side, Matt, in terms of what I've taken away is, you know, use a framework, whatever it is. I love the CIS. We've got our Essential 8, and that's expanding, but the CIS, make yourself defensible. And talk to your and share that. Use that as an anchor point when you're having those conversations with your customer, going, "Hey guys, I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. This is what your government is saying that needs to be put in place in order for you guys to be safe, to be secure, and to have put your own foot forward." So, I mean, that's what I've taken away, and I hope that, and I know that the partners that we've met with so far are just really resonating and appreciating that message. And we've got 6 more cities to hit, and I'm excited for sharing that story and helping to rise the tide of the entire industry down here. So super happy that you're down here, and then I've learned so much from you in the last couple of weeks as well.
Dom, any closing thoughts, and then do the subscription stuff.
Do the algorithmic things. All right. Well, this has been great. Thanks so much for joining us, James. I learned a ton in the last hour that I didn't quite understand yet about the market down there. So it's been a good time. I'm super excited to see what comes of this as we continue to grow and expand and continue to educate. And I think our conversations about where is Australia in the realm of cybersecurity maturity in the world is really going to be a different conversation a year from now. So I'm super excited to watch it. As Matt mentioned, if you're watching, down there's a button that says subscribe. If it's red, it's the wrong color. We need you to turn it gray. Click the little bell, make it ring so that you know when we're about to come on. We are here almost every Friday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, and you can catch the recordings on Pax8 Cloud on YouTube, and we will see you on the next one.
Love you all. Thank you for being here.